Hello and welcome to Crux Investor. We caught up earlier today with Tim Carstens, who's the MD at Base Resources. They're an ASX-listed mineral sands company with assets in Kenya and also Madagascar. We talk through the projects in Kenya as they wind down. Are they going to be able to extend the life by adding a couple of new projects there? Also in Madagascar, conversations around terms with the government are at the forefront of his mind, along with funding and how they choose to do that. So if you want our thoughts and opinions on that conversation and the various topics discussed and the company itself, you can find that at cruxinvestor.com/club, where you can also find detailed company reports and analysis, which you might find interesting, commentary from experts from around the world on a variety of companies and commodities. There are training courses on there to help you with your diligence process, plus summaries of other interviews that we've done to save you some time. And of course, there's a big thriving community of intelligent investors sharing their thoughts and ideas with each other in a nice, friendly, safe environment, free from trolling and abuse. And if you like the sound of that, you should go and join them at cruxinvestor.com/club. We'd love your feedback too. Give us a like, it'd be appreciated. If your thoughts below, we'll get back to absolutely everyone. And of course, if you want to see what we talked about today specifically, do take a look in the description below. Tim, how are you doing, sir?
I'm very well. How are you?
All good over here. Whereabouts are you?
In Perth. We're confined to barracks in Australia for the foreseeable future.
Okay, not bad barracks, quite frankly. So does that mean like you have not been able to get back into Kenya or Madagascar since I last spoke?
No, it's been nearly a year since I left Madagascar, around the middle of March. So yeah, it's been a long time.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, well, we wanted to catch up with you. Got half year results. You're throwing dividends around as well. So that's always quite nice to talk about. Could you, for people new to this, because quite a few new people on the platform now, can you just give us that 1 minute overview of the business and I'll pick it up from there?
Yeah, sure. We're headquartered in Perth, listed on the ASX, also listed on AIM in London. Our flagship operation is the Kwale Operation in Kenya. We produce, we're a mineral sands producer, pure clay mineral sands. So we produce ilmenite, rutile and zircon. Kwale has been operating since the end of 2013 and continues to be an extremely strong, robust, consistent cash generator. And in 2018, we took our first step into expanding the business with the acquisition of the Toliara Project in Madagascar that we've been progressing through the study phases.
Brilliant, appreciate that. Look, and I think for people who want to kind of get into the business plan, strategy, the team, etc., I'll point them to the link below, in the description below. They can pick up on that. I think today we want to talk about where you are today and looking forward. So last time we spoke, I think it was June, July of last year. We weren't quite sure how this whole COVID thing was going to pan out. But you were preparing for the worst. You drew down $75 million facility that you had. Was that the right move?
Yeah, look, I think I'd do it again. Obviously with the benefit of hindsight, you say it was an overreaction, but based on the way we saw the world and the risks that it presented and then the unknown, none of us had been down this path before. It was the right call. We made that decision in April based on the view that he who has the most firepower wins. So we repaid 50 million of that at the end of September, and the last 25 will be repaid at the end of March. Okay,
so we better explain to people where all this money's coming from. You've got a very cash generative ATM in Kenya. So just run us through the basic numbers there for people new to this.
Yeah, Kwale is a pretty substantial producer. The guidance for this year is, for about 270,000 to 300,000 tons of ilmenite, 70 to 80,000 tons of rutile, and 24 to 27,000 tons of zircon or thereabouts. We're very sort of weighted to the second half of each year, or this year in particular, but we're on track to hit that guidance. Spinning off good amount of cash. We paid out $30 million US in our maiden dividend in October of last year. And in conjunction with this first half of FY21, we've paid or declared or determined, I think is the correct phrase, another dividend of which will be about $27.5 million US. So combination of those two is 6.5 cents per share. And the context of at the moment a 31 cent share price, and it's pretty sizable yield.
Yeah, for sure, and I do want to come on to that in a second. So with regards to what's happening in Kenya, you've been there a while. It's been throwing off circa 100 million EBITDA every year for a long time now. So, and as I say, a lot of cash being splashed around too. You're running down the grades on some of the dunes there, and you last time we spoke, you were looking at sort of a northern dune, and you were looking at maybe a couple of other assets too to kind of extend the life of operation in Kenya. How's that gone?
Yeah, so with the South Dune that we're mining now, we've been mining for 18 months. It's our lower grade of the two dunes we started with. And we've actually just finished the lowest grade half that we'll have over the life of that deposit. That's got ore through until the end of 2023. The next, I guess, opportunity for extension comes with the pre-feasibility study on the North Dune, which is our third deposit. That's due for delivery in April. It's a very large dune, but it's extremely low grade. And just to put that in context, this half was our lowest grade half at 3.1% heavy mineral. The South Dune averages about the North Dune averages about 1.5 to 1.6%. So very low grade. Not clear what, if any, of that will make a sensible extension of the mine. We've still got to wrap up the work to decide that. But there are a couple of pieces of it that we think will add some extension. The question is how much. Is it 5 months? Is it 6 months? Is it a year? Is it 2 years? Is the sort of thought process we're just going through at the moment. Then beyond that, we've got some areas that we want to get in and get drilling on to better understand. We've got one area that we did some drilling on in the last sort of 3 or 4 months. It's called what we call the Vanga deposit or Vanga prospect. Hasn't really shown much of interest yet, but we've still got a fair way to go in that work. One of the main areas we want to get into, we're still waiting on the exploration license to be granted, and I can come back to that in a minute. But the other area that we're looking to get into has been, it's been a bit problematic with community access issues over an extended period of time, but they've been resolving relatively quickly over the last 6 months or so with a change of political leadership in the area and the like. So we're hopeful we'll get in there with some auger drilling just to test that out in the near term. And then further afield, we've got a couple of projects that we're pretty excited to get into. One in particular is, depending on which part of it you're talking about, between 50 and 70 kilometres away from the Kwale current operation. But it's pretty exciting from the perspective of rutile potential. So we're really keen to get in there. What's holding us back there at the moment is, again, this granting of license issue. And what the core of that is, about 12 months ago, the government made the decision to close the cadastre in Kenya while they cleaned up a few ethics issues in the way some licences were being issued or had been issued. And they've been working on that over the last 12 months, and that's meant that no licences can be granted. So we understand that moratorium on, or the closing of the cadastre and the moratorium on issuance is likely to lift in the coming weeks, month, which we're pretty excited about, because then we can get the show back on the road.
Well, I mean, obviously, you're quite an important part of the Kenyan mining scene, because you told me you're 65% of it when we last spoke. Yeah. So mining is not a big part of the economy in Kenya. Mining regulation, mining law, I mean, is that easy to work with? Are you working with the government in terms of, or around this cadastre? Are you able to influence it?
Look, we work pretty closely with the government in all forms, and with the ministry. But the process of cleaning up the sort of ethics side of the cadastre is something that it's not our place to put an oar in the water, to be honest. But we work pretty closely with the government. From a regulatory point of view, it's quite a reasonable framework. There's very good respect for the rule of law in Kenya. They went through the process of producing an updated or new, pretty much was new, mining code in 2016. So a lot of work went into that. I think there's still quite a bit of work that could go into that further to make it more attractive. for future investment. I think the government understands that too. But from a regulatory point of view, it's a good environment.
Right, and with regards to the two projects, obviously west of Kwale, I always wonder about the kind of ESG component, because you're going to be raising funds for Madagascar. Funds look at you and how you operate in country. ESG is becoming a very big part, or certainly one of the big components of the decision to allocate funds. Have you seen any reason for concern in Kenya, or in the way that they would look at the way you've behaved in country?
Not at all. We're seen as the poster child for how mining should be done in Kenya. We win a lot of awards for the way we go about things, whether it be from World Wildlife Fund or World Economic Forum. Our community development programs are seen as the benchmark for how these things should be done. It's from a safety perspective, we've actually volunteered our safety system as almost open source to the ministry to use what they think they need to use of it to try and raise the standards amongst the artisanal and small scale miners. We've done similar things with our industrial training framework with the National Industrial Training Authority. So, where we are really regarded as one of the first thought of companies when people are thinking about who gets ESG right in practical terms in Africa. What we probably haven't done quite as well as we could have is, we've been doing the do extremely well. We haven't been doing the promote of that, or the articulation of it, or the reporting of it in the way people like to see reports now. Now, that's something we've recognised as a shortcoming, and we need to lift our ESG reporting so people can have that better real-time window in on what we do.
Okay, well, gives a snapshot of it. How much are you spending locally?
Community development programs in Kenya are about $3.5 million US a year. We've been doing that over a long period of time. We've spent in terms of COVID response, about another 2.5 million US on things like we procured 100 ventilators for the medical system. We've produced 140, I think was the final number, of hygiene stations right throughout the Kwale County area, so that people actually have infrastructure to be able to wash their hands as a first defence against COVID. So it's a pretty substantial investment, but we have a bit of a different philosophy around community engagement, and this probably tells the story. I've actually banned the use of the phrase corporate social responsibility, because to me that's the language of obligation. It's what you do to be seen to be corporately socially responsible. And we treat all of this as just core business. It's imperative to our strategic direction, and we believe is a source of strategic competitive advantage. We focus on what we call a felt fair exchange of mutual benefit. So we're very clear with the community what we need from them, from a proud, happy workforce to a reference for where we want to go next and everything in between. And we're very clear about what we're going to provide to them in order for that to be felt fair. And that sort of transactional approach gets rid of surprises. It gets rid of this sort of sense of dependence on community, or tokenism is the other sort of way a lot of those programs tend to manifest. It has to be meaningful if we're going to get what we need.
No, I think that's interesting. And the only reason I ask is because it's becoming such a big topic, has been with funds for the last 5-10 years, retail just kind of catching on to it. I think another phrase that we hear a lot is social license, and that again suggests that I say we'll do this, but you've got to allow us to do something else. It's conditional. So I like your approach, but I think document it. So people need to hear more about this for sure.
We've got quite a big project this year on elevating our ESG reporting framework.
Right. Okay. And I think the reason you're going to have time to do that is because, again, for people new to this, the actual the mining for you is quite easy. Technically, it's very easy, right? Just add water. It's the processing bit that adds the value. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, from a mining perspective, it is pretty simple. I mean, the mining guys get a bit upset with me when I describe it as stockpile management. rather than mining. But look, I mean, there's quite a bit to it. The way we do it nowadays is with hydraulic mining. So we're just using monitor guns, applying water to the face of the sand dune, and then creating a slurry that gets pumped up to the mine site, and then we just progressively rehabilitate behind ourselves. So you don't have a huge swathe of land disturbed at any point in time. But yeah, the magic's in the processing. It's as much art as science in some ways. It's all based on physical separation rather than chemical separation. So just playing off on small differences in the physical properties of the grains.
Okay, so let's talk about the market before we get on to Madagascar, if you don't mind, because you've demonstrated in Kenya that you're able to do this, you're able to do it and make a stack of money. And now you've identified a project in Madagascar, but there's got to be a market for this. So ilmenite, rutile, and zircon. What's happening in those markets at the moment? Is it, are the prices going up? Are they static? I mean, what's happening? Where's the demand coming from?
Yeah, well, in terms of ilmenite and rutile, I mean, first thing just to point out is they're just two different forms of titanium dioxide. Rutile's, call it 95% TiO2. And ilmenite in our case is around 50% TiO2. They're both predominantly used in the production of pigment. So pretty much everything you see with a colour, whether it's from food dyes to clothing to car paints to packaging, has a titanium dioxide pigment in it. And now we were anticipating that we would see quite a sharp drop-off in demand over the course of the COVID experience, when the reality is that pigment consumption over 2020, now based on the latest statistics, looks like it was higher than 2019, which is quite surprising. There's been a redistribution. Instead of as much of it going into the production of cars, we've seen a lot more in packaging, for example, or do-it-yourself painting of houses. And now we're starting to see the consumption associated with a lot of the stimulus programs starting to also drive demand. So we've seen the ilmenite price just continue to rise. Right now we're getting the highest prices for ilmenite that we've had since we've been operating when we started at the end of 2013. It's around $250 a tonne FOB. Rutile came off a bit. The high-grade feedstock came off a bit over the course of the half. But November, December started to really tighten up again, and based on demand from downstream customers rather than sort of supply constraints particularly. And we're now seeing that price starting to move back up to around $1,200 a tonne, which is the high level. We haven't seen it higher than that too many times in the past. The third product we produce in zircon is predominantly used as an opacifier in ceramics. Its price is moderated over the course of most of the early part of 2020, stabilised through the second half of 2020, and now we'll start to see demand picking up again and the market tightening up nicely. So if you look forward a few years, and it's one of the things that motivated the acquisition of the Toliara project, there is just an absolute need for new supply to come into the market. The slow march up of demand based around global GDP growth has caught up with supply, and there hasn't been any new supply come on in any meaningful way. Basically since Kwale and a couple of other projects came on back in late 2013, early 2014. And there's a need for new supply. So we think we're standing at the front of the queue for that with the best project in the Toliara project.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, that whole behavioural economics of the last year, but not many people kind of, I think, called it right, and hopefully with these infrastructure programs, you'll benefit from that. But looking forward, when you say there's no new supply coming on, in the sense that there's no big meaningful supply. We've spoken to a few companies that are trying but struggling with finance. Where are you inserting yourself in the queue? Because I noticed last time you were talking about 75% of your sales are contracted, right? You're going to have to take a view on how you, and that's obviously from Kwale. When you get Toliara going, have the optics of last year or your thoughts on supply demand going forward changed your thoughts about how you would contract with Toliara materials?
Not at all. I guess the key point to make here is it's not just us on the supply side who are seeing the supply shortfall coming. The big customers, the major pigment producers around the world are seeing it coming as well, and are reasonably nervous about it in terms of how it dovetails in with their expansion plans. So what we're seeing is quite a degree of interest in contracting meaningful volume, but B, probably more significantly in the context of funding Toliara, is the interest in potential joint venture participation in the project, to be able to secure a larger slice of the offtake. So there's a lot going on in that space at the moment.
So let's think about that. So I know you're potentially looking for a strategic partner. But I'm sure you've got various options, but given your track record and given the scale of what you think you've got ahead of you at Toliara, and the supply-demand story that you're talking about in the marketplace, is this a buyer's market or a seller's market? I mean, how good a deal do you think you'd be able to do with a strategic partner, or do you think you just get regular financing and the demand's always going to be there?
Oh, look, I mean, we would be quite happy to progress the project with regular financing, if that gave the best answer to shareholders. We see a real opportunity with bringing in a joint venture participant for a few reasons. One is obviously as a contributor to the financing, but that really depends on the pricing of that participation and whether that's a better answer for shareholders or not. But because of the strategic angle to it, we're feeling like we're going to get an answer that's significantly better than a straight financial equation. The second thing is bringing in a big partner like that enables you, or gives you the comfort to sign an even bigger offtake agreement with one party, knowing you've got their feet to the fire. And being able to do that just provides so much more certainty around the marketing effort. When you're bringing on a big project like Toliara, where you're talking about 800,000 tonnes of ilmenite to begin with. The other thing it does, given the size of the ore body we have at Toliara, and the clear scope to expand that production reasonably, quite efficiently, given that once you've built the infrastructure, you don't need to expand that. What that means by bringing in a big partner like that is you can potentially underwrite a rapid move to that expansion by having broken the back of the offtake. So there's a whole lot of really good reasons to go down this path.
Okay. And again, before we just dive more into the Madagascar project, let's talk about your half-yearly results. Nice big dividend there, but what are the other big numbers that people should be paying attention to?
Well, I mean, EBITDA for the half was just under $34 million US, which is lower than the run rate that we've had in the past. It's a function of mining volume during the half, which was a bit lower because we had an 8-day shut. It was a bit lower because we were mining lower face heights, which mean we've got to move gear more often. It was our lowest grade period that we're going to have. And the third factor was just timing of sales, to be honest. We ended up having a major rutile shipment go out in the early weeks of January rather than in December. So the split for this year will be more or less 40-60 for the two halves. So that's why we're still on track for the full year. So it was a really, really strong half operationally. I mean, given all of the destabilisation that could have occurred with COVID, the fact that we were able to maintain production at the level we thought we would, no interruptions, costs have been maintained at exactly the level they have been, and we haven't had any safety issues at all. We haven't had any LTIs and no medical treatment injuries. Really shows the degree of focus the guys have had. So I rack up this 6 months as a stellar 6 months. Right.
Net loss at 6.3 million. Why is that?
Yeah. Oh, look, there's a few factors in that. I mean, obviously the lumpiness from half to half is one factor. It's timing of tax payments. It's a few other odds and sods. The second half will be considerably better.
Great. Okay. Let's go to Toliara. Okay. And I want to start with the government first. Okay. They were on a steep learning curve, it seemed. Again, you're in a
it's actually the reverse of that, to be honest. Madagascar has had two very large mining projects on which to cut its teeth. We had Rio's QMM project that was built 15 odd years ago. And then we had the big Ambatavi project, nickel cobalt, $9 billion, huge project. So they've learned a lot about mining. Unfortunately, the problem is that to a certain extent, the government's been disappointed in what those projects have been able to generate for the country. Neither of them have been particularly or have been profitable. They just haven't delivered the result that they thought. So there's a bit of a bow wave of perception that we've got to overcome, and being able to point to how we're going to be different. So for them, from a government perspective, there's a completely legitimate and understandable desire to make sure that they get it right with this one. Hence why they're looking for a bigger share of the project, and by that I mean not equity share, but royalty rates and the like. And they're being pretty cautious in the way they're tackling it because they don't want to get it wrong.
But I think last time we talked about the conversations that had gone along the lines of getting free carry and 20% ownership and so forth. And you were having the conversation, well, how do we maybe give you something, but maybe use royalties as a mechanism to do that? So, I mean, how are those conversations going?
Sort of. I mean, the equity issue has not been the issue. The issue we had was back in late 2019. An initial draft for an amended mining code was just sort of thrown out with no consultation, and it included the concept of 20% production sharing, which is not an equity interest. It's taking 20% of production. So it's in economic terms, it's the same thing as a 20% royalty. Now, pretty quickly, people of the ilk of the World Bank and others advised the government that was not a sensible pathway from a policy perspective, and that got withdrawn and disappeared quite quickly. And subsequently, the advice that's sort of going into government is around more modest increases in royalties. We've heard from the Minister of Mines at different times, talking about an increase from 2% to 4%. That sort of order of magnitude. So those discussions are progressing along. Not at as rollicking a pace as we would perhaps like, but still progressing in the correct direction.
So you're getting help from development funds and the like. Well, the Madagascar government are getting help.
Look, they're not remote from advice now, as they were back in late 2019. There is advice going into government, which is encouraging, and just a question of how long it takes for that to percolate through and comfort to be landed that sees them want to move forward. But we're consistently hearing from government in all manner of different ways that they're very keen to lift the suspension on activity and get this project moving. So we're just, being patient.
No option other than to be patient, I suspect. But talk to me about, because obviously no one's going to give you $350 million until that's nailed down. They need certainty over the terms and your agreements with the government. So it's not a question if, it's a question of when, right? So you're not going to put a date on that yet.
No, we're not. We stepped away from trying to arbitrarily put a date on it because, to be honest, we'd be guessing. And it doesn't help anyone for us to be nominating dates when we have no real basis for knowing when we're going to land it. So what we are saying is from lifting of the suspension, which will be in all likelihood consequent with the agreement of fiscal terms, we've got 11 months of work to complete until we can achieve an FID. And then there's 26 months from that point until first production on a ship heading off. So just to emphasise that point, if we were to land the fiscal terms by the end of March, we'd be looking at an FID around the end of February next year.
Okay, so the process is very quick once you've got certainty from the government as to where they sit.
Yeah, because we've done a lot of the work. Yeah, we've done a lot of the work, and we're continuing to do a lot of the off-site work. So things like the financing is all progressing. We've probably taken that as far as we can take it without being able to get boots on the ground and have fiscal terms agreed. I mean, things like the lender's independent engineers review of the entire configuration of the project, that's been completed. They're happy with the configuration of the project. The only thing that sort of final sign-off on that is waiting for is just a site visit to ground truth.
Sure.
Things, but we've taken that a long way down the track.
But I just want to understand where you are with the government thing. So we're far away from the 20% of production, and we're sort of near a more conventional royalty level. So you're arguing, well, not arguing, you're discussing down around, regular royalty levels.
We're
trying to,
we're
change
discussing
dramatically.
the terms now.
Right. Okay.
Yep. I can't really say any more than that. It'd be inappropriate. So.
Okay. I just put in the minds of investors, I'm trying to say the cost to you if you're negotiating down one end versus the other end is obviously significant. So it's
absolutely. And as soon as we have something to report that is publicly available, it will be publicly available.
Okay, Tim, appreciate your time. Maybe just leave us some thoughts about what we should be looking out for in 2021.
Yeah, 2021 is going to be a very a really big year for us, and we're expecting it to be transformational in the sense that we'll have some greater clarity around life of mine in Kwale in Kenya, and hopefully extending our stay in country. I'll be pretty surprised and massively disappointed if we're not really off and running with the Madagascar project. We both parties in us and the government have really clearly aligned interests in wanting to get this moving quickly and expressed desire to get it moving quickly. So we just need to make sure we land on a sensible outcome. I've got a high degree of confidence we're going to get there. And then I think we'll find by this time next year, we'll be having a conversation about an approaching FID.
Excellent. Tim, appreciate your time today. Stay in touch. It's been great talking to you.
Yeah, cheers. Thanks a lot.